Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Riley Whitelaw. Riley Whitelaw was born on January 20, 2005 in Colorado Springs, El Paso County, USA, the only child of Courtney, a single mother. From an early age, Riley demonstrated kindness, empathy, and respect for others. Her bright smile brought warmth and joy to everyone around her. Riley loves to draw and wants to learn to play the guitar. After attending the Air Force Academy, she proved herself to be an excellent student. Among her classmates, she was known for her calm demeanor, confidence, and leadership skills. When Riley was a teenager, her mother met a man named Chris Johnson. Their relationship quickly developed into love, leading to the decision to marry. Riley, who always wanted the best for her mother, did her best to adapt to the changes Chris brought to their home. Chris, who never had the opportunity to be a father, welcomed Riley with open arms and treated her like his own daughter, expressing that he felt lucky to be a part of her life. In 2021, Riley is 16 years old, she is more mature, and gets a part-time job at a branch of an American company that operates the second-largest pharmacy chain in the country. This pharmacy not only sells medicines and healthcare products but also provides photography services. Riley only works 2 days a week because she still has to continue her studies. Despite her busy schedule, she feels happy and enthusiastically accepts the challenge. At first, everything goes smoothly. Riley enjoys her job and always completes her tasks. She quickly gains the appreciation of customers and builds good relationships with her colleagues. Among Riley's coworkers is a man named Joshua Johnson. Not much is known about his background, but he is in his 30s and has just been released from prison. The appearance of Riley, a young girl at the pharmacy, changes his life. Joshua, who is withdrawn and hot-tempered, is Riley's complete opposite. Despite their differences, Joshua develops feelings for her. Everyone around him notices this and realizes his unusual intentions, considering Riley's age. However, he insists that he will wait until she is an adult before asking her out. Joshua cannot hide his feelings for Riley for long and begins to show his attention to her, trying to win her over. He eventually openly confesses his love for her. However, Riley does not have feelings for him. After being rejected, Joshua becomes hurt and begins to act out, trying to hurt Riley whenever possible. During a class where he is supposed to teach her and another coworker about how to work in a photo lab, he completely ignores her. This behavior frustrates Riley, as it negatively affects the quality of her work. Joshua refuses to answer her questions or offer any help. Initially, Riley was upset and often reflected on Joshua's behavior toward her, wondering what she had done to deserve such negative treatment. However, over time, Joshua crossed the line. First, he touched her inappropriately. And then he slapped her. Riley felt both angry and offended by these actions. She realized that Joshua was invading her and her personal space. Riley chose to speak up about the incident. Gathering her courage, she informed the pharmacy manager, Justin Sunni, about what had happened. Justin helped to remind Joshua. Joshua remained silent and pretended to understand. Nothing else was done to protect Riley. Not wanting to worry her mother, Riley decides to keep the meeting between her, Joshua, and her manager Justin a secret. However, she still shared with Courtney the impact Joshua's behavior had had on her. For a while, they barely worked together, and Riley tried to forget about the incident. However, when she decided to increase her hours, she found herself scheduled to work the same shift as Joshua. In early 2020, she met Jacob Lee, who was 2 years older than her. As their relationship developed, they decided to date. Suddenly, Jacob decided to work part-time at the pharmacy, just like Riley. In early spring 2022, Jacob started working, allowing them to spend more time together. Like Riley, Jacob quickly became friends with all the employees, except Joshua. Although there were no major conflicts between them, Joshua always seemed uncomfortable whenever they had to work together. Jacob wasn't the only one who noticed. The second manager, Crystal Ismail, also noticed that Joshua was jealous of Jacob because he was Riley's boyfriend. Joshua saw Jacob as his rival. Joshua still didn't give up on his love and continued to try to get closer to Riley. Feeling frustrated by his harassment, Riley finally asked for a change in her working hours. After a while, Riley needed more money and wanted to work overtime. Her boss informed her that she would have to work the same shift as Joshua because she had no other choice. Riley shared her concerns with Jacob. Riley shares her concerns with Jacob, but he doesn't take her words seriously and doesn't realize the severity of the situation. This disappoints Riley. On June 11, 2022, Riley was at the pharmacy where Crystal was in charge of management, and everything was going smoothly. Although Joshua was on the same shift as Riley, he took advantage of his coworker's distraction to enter the break room. First, he placed a busy sign on the bathroom door, then blocked the view of one of the surveillance cameras with containers, and finally taped the window. The exact details of what happened next remain unclear, but when it was time for Riley's break, she entered the break room where Joshua was hiding, ready to put her plan into action. At approximately 5:44 p.m., surveillance camera footage captured a customer named Alicia Shanky in the store when she heard a woman scream. Seconds later, she heard the door close, but Alicia ignored it. She made her purchase and left the store. Meanwhile, in the break room, Joshua attacked Riley with a knife, and the attack was both quick and brutal, and Riley died instantly. Crystal, the store manager, becomes concerned when Riley does not return to work after her break and becomes even more suspicious when she notices that Joshua is also missing. She quickly goes outside the door where the trash can is. As she approaches, she sees someone's bare feet and, feeling scared, she rushes back to the pharmacy, locking the front desk door to prevent anyone from entering. This allows Joshua to dispose of Riley's blood-stained items in the trash without being seen. He then returns home. A few minutes later, Crystal mustered up the courage and went outside again, but the person was gone. Unable to find Riley, she decided to contact the manager, Justin. She also called Jacob, but he had no information on Riley's location. Justin then went to the pharmacy to investigate the situation. It was a little after 6 p.m. when he arrived. When he arrived, he quickly began reviewing the surveillance camera footage and saw Riley walking towards the break room. In an earlier recording, he noticed Joshua stacking boxes and containers to block the camera's view. Justin walked into the break room, quickly opened the door, and turned on the lights. He was horrified to see blood everywhere. And in the corner of the room, he found Riley's body. Shocked, Justin called the police at 6:05 p.m. 10 minutes later. Officers arrived at the pharmacy, where they discovered Riley's body. She was found on the floor with her badge and headphones nearby. In addition to the severe neck injury, she had suffered several other injuries. Alicia, a customer at the pharmacy during the day, passed by the scene that evening and noticed police and patrol cars. She stopped to report the screams she had heard earlier. Police officers Steve Alonso and Mike Lee began their investigation. Meanwhile, someone informed Riley's mother, Courtney, of the tragic news. The distraught mother rushed to the pharmacy and was stunned when she arrived at the crime scene. When asked by police if she knew anyone who Riley's enemies were or who might have committed such an act, Courtney did not remember Joshua. She believed her daughter was the victim of a robbery and did not know that her daughter was actually murdered by a coworker. Police collected evidence at the crime scene and sent the body for forensic examination. The Riley had 42 stab wounds, and there were similar injuries on her hands, suggesting she attempted to defend herself. Experts concluded that she died from a lack of oxygen. Joshua fled the city early in the morning but was stopped by a patrol officer as he headed toward the New Mexico border. The officer was unaware of his actions and arrested him based solely on his appearance, as his face was covered in cuts, scrapes, and bruises. When asked about his injuries, Joshua claimed that he had been attacked in a store in Colorado Springs. However, when the patrol officer contacted Colorado Springs police, they discovered that Joshua was actually the suspect in Riley's murder and not the victim. Afterwards, he was arrested and brought back to the city. Currently, the pharmacy's representatives are not making any statements to the media. Police have denied permission to share information that might disrupt the ongoing investigation. The pharmacy has closed its doors and is no longer serving customers. Nearby, the community has set up a makeshift memorial for Riley, adorning it with numerous flowers, letters, and gifts from those who are grieving. Joshua admitted during his initial police interview that he was in love with Riley. He admitted to being in the break room with her but claimed that the incident was accidental. This confession led police to identify him as the person who had been near Crystal at the dumpster. Despite the evidence against him, Joshua maintained his innocence and denied obstructing the view of the security camera. Police later discovered his DNA on the murder weapon. After obtaining a court warrant to search his home, they found a black hoodie with blood and traces of DNA belonging to Riley. Joshua was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail in El Paso County, with his trial scheduled for June 2022. Riley's funeral was held on June 23, 2022. Her mother received many letters of support from classmates, pharmacy customers, and others. On November 15, 2022, Joshua pleaded not guilty to all charges at his preliminary hearing. The trial was originally scheduled to begin on March 6, 2023, but the defense requested additional time to prepare and requested that Joshua undergo a mental health evaluation to determine whether he was competent to stand trial. As a result, the trial was postponed. The evaluation later determined that Joshua was sane. He remains in custody at the El Paso County Jail, with bail set at $10 million. In late September 2023, after all attempts to postpone the trial, Joshua finally appeared in court and faced Riley's relatives. On the first day of the trial, the prosecutor explained to the jury that Joshua and Riley both worked at a pharmacy and detailed the events that took place there. The defense maintained that Joshua happened to be at the crime scene. They presented that Joshua entered the break room and found Riley lying on the floor. At that point, he was attacked by an unknown assailant, causing him to flee for safety, despite feeling guilty for leaving Riley behind. However, witness testimonies have made it clear that Joshua's account is incorrect. One of the longest testimonies came from Justin, who discovered the body and was the pharmacy manager that first contacted the police. The prosecutor's office also called Riley's mother, Courtney, to testify. She shared insights about her daughter, describing her as someone who loved to help others. Courtney mentioned that Riley had expressed concerns about Joshua's behavior on several occasions. She recalled one incident when Riley was working with Joshua in the photo services area, where he touched her inappropriately. This led Riley to speak with her supervisors, resulting in her being allowed to change her work schedule. In October 2023, after arguments from both the prosecution and defense had concluded, after an hour of deliberations, the jury reached a verdict. Joshua Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder. The judge expressed gratitude to everyone who contributed to achieving justice, especially the Colorado Springs police. After the trial, some expressed their anger toward Joshua, while others chose to remember Riley as a kind, young girl who tragically lost her life because of his actions. On the podium in the auditorium, there were 3 items: an empty vase, a bag containing 42 purple stones, and a small bouquet of sunflowers. Riley's loved ones had brought these items on purpose. The stones represented the number of wounds Riley had suffered. Each person giving a speech took a handful of stones and put them in a vase. The ninth and final speaker was her mother, Courtney. She wore a jacket with the insignia of the National Guard, where her daughter served. Despite her deep grief, Courtney spoke very strongly that she would not let Joshua, whom she called a monster, take away her love for her late daughter. People admired her for this, considering it her greatest strength. She emphasized that her daughter was never afraid to express her opinion when things were not going well and always confidently led others. At the end of her speech, Courtney placed the sunflowers in a vase containing 42 purple stones before returning to her seat. At the end of the hearing, Joshua Johnson was sentenced to life in prison. Courtney established a memorial fund in Riley's name, which provides scholarships to high school graduates. In the future, Courtney plans to organize charity events that she believes Riley would have enjoyed, including art nights, exhibitions, and running. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sophia Urrutia. The Urrutia family lived in Canning Vale, a suburb of Perth with about 35,000 residents. The family included 7 members and a dog. The children were Isabel, the youngest at 3 years old, Sophia, who was 8, Ines, 11, and Gabriel, who was 14. The parents, though busy with work, maintained a close relationship with their children and treated them well. Josephine, the mother, was a loving and caring woman who worked hard to provide comfort for her family and manage the household. Caring for children from toddler to teenager is a challenging task because the needs of children at each stage are different. The father often had to go on business trips to Hong Kong, resulting in frequent absences from home. 8-year-old Sophia Urrutia, a girl attending a Catholic elementary school where she was loved by all her classmates and teachers. Sophia was well-mannered, naturally tactful, inquisitive. She helped her mother and took care of her younger sister. Sophia had many hobbies, including painting and dancing. Her uncle, who lived with them, often helped with the children and frequently took them on outings. On June 26, 2006, the kids eagerly await a trip to the mall. Little do they know that a dangerous force is also at work there. It was a regular weekday. The uncle picked up the children after school, and they went to the local shopping center, Leamington. It was a small shopping area, but it had everything local residents needed. 3 children were with their uncle, 14-year-old Gabriel, 11-year-old Ines, and 8-year-old Sophia. During their walk, Sophia excitedly shared that she had been chosen to perform an interesting Indonesian dance. She was thrilled and proud, and her uncle and siblings praised her. While at the shopping center, Sophia needed to use the restroom and informed them at the checkout. Being familiar with the shopping center, her uncle allowed her to go alone while they finished unpacking and paying for their items. The restroom wasn't far, and Sophia ran off by herself. The uncle watched her until she entered the restroom, not realizing it would be the last time he saw her alive. After paying, they left the store and went to wait for Sophia outside the restroom, but she took longer than expected. Concerned, the uncle moved closer to call out to her, but there was no response. He didn't enter the women's restroom, so he sent Gabriel and Ines to check both the women's and men's restrooms. Ines knocked on the women's door, but there was no answer. Gabriel checked the men's restroom, but it was silent. They also tried the nearby disabled restroom, where they heard some noise, but a male voice responded that it was occupied, scaring them away. Worried, Gabriel and Ines thought Sophia might have exited through another door, possibly heading to a restaurant or becoming lost in the shopping center. Sophia's uncle waited in the hallway, while the rest searched for her around the shopping center. After 10 minutes, Gabriel couldn't wait any longer and went back to the toilets to call out to her, thinking she hadn't heard him. As he approached the disabled toilet, the door suddenly swung open. A tough-looking guy, about 20 years old, emerged. Their eyes met briefly, and Gabriel instinctively felt something was wrong. Gabriel immediately noticed Sophia's discarded school uniform in the waste bin. He moved closer and saw a lifeless, naked body on the floor. By then, the guy had already run down the corridor and was out of sight. Gabriel rushed to Sophia, but she showed no signs of life. He began to scream in the toilet. The uncle and the other children who were with Sophia at the mall that day quickly arrived at the scene. The police were called immediately, and mall security was notified. The entire mall was closed. Top doctors confirmed the girl's death. They couldn't save her. Forensic experts sealed the toilet and began examining the crime scene to ensure no important evidence was damaged or lost. Gabriel, who witnessed the criminal, was able to describe him, prompting police to search the mall for the suspicious man who had emerged from the handicapped restroom. During their initial search, the police could not locate him within the premises and assumed he had already escaped. The public was shocked by the brutal crime that had taken place. In what seemed like a safe, quiet place, no one imagined that letting a child go to the toilet could result in losing them forever. This murder would later be deemed the most brutal in Western Australia's history due to the horrific nature of the crime and Sophia's injuries. Unfortunately, the CCTV cameras in the corridor were not working that day. At the time, detectives only had a description provided by Gabriel, which was clearly insufficient. The crime was committed with horrifying brutality. The child, Sophia, died from suffocation. The attacker not only cut off her air supply but also squeezed her neck so forcefully that her larynx was completely crushed. Her arms were dislocated, and she suffered severe injuries and ruptures due to forced sexual assault. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted about 5 minutes, during which the attacker brutally harmed she. Even the most seasoned detectives, who regularly deal with various crimes, also described the case as the most serious they had ever encountered. Sophia had no reason to use the disabled toilet. It was possible that she was quickly dragged inside by someone. The criminal was probably already inside, waiting for a victim, and Sophia was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, becoming an unintended victim. She was seized so suddenly that she didn't have time to scream. The attacker immediately began strangling her. She stood no chance against an adult man and couldn't even call for help, even though her relatives were nearby and heard nothing. Investigators began compiling a list of all sex offenders in the area and questioned shopping center employees using a portrait of the suspect. It was urgent to find the criminal because panic was spreading throughout the city. People were terrified by the brutal attack on a young girl and were afraid to go outside. Several shopping center employees recognized the man in the portrait as 21 years old Dante Wyndham Arthurs. He is fat, looks very pale, and worked as a packer of vegetables and fruits at one of the stores in the shopping center. On the day of the incident, Dante was on shift but then disappeared. The police became interested in him and checked his criminal history. They discovered that 3 years prior to this murder, he had been arrested for sexually assaulting another 8-year-old girl. At that time, the police lacked sufficient evidence to charge him, so he was released. Early the next morning, around 5 o'clock, detectives, knowing Dante's address, went to his home, where he lived with his parents, just a short distance from the shopping center. They interrogated Dante and searched his residence. During the search, investigators discovered a sports bag containing latex gloves, handcuffs, rope, a knife, and several photographs with personal information. The oldest girl in the photos was 15 years old, and the others were younger. Some photos included details such as names, ages, home addresses, and the shortest routes to reach them using public transport, suggesting he was stalking these girls and planning attacks. However, Sophia was not among these photos. Within hours, Dante was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, as well as sexual assault and forcible detention of Sophia. Dante Wyndham Arthurs was born on August 8, 1984, in Western Australia. His family soon moved to the UK, where they lived for 8 years before returning to Australia. As a teenager, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition marked by difficulties with social communication and repetitive, obsessive behavior. During questioning, he neither confirmed nor denied his guilt and did not take the events seriously. He described the situation as if he were an outsider watching the horrific crime occur. He was unable to provide details or explain his motives, suggesting it felt as if the actions were not his own. Furthermore, Dante could not specify whether the sexual assault happened before or after the murder. This detail was crucial because, in Western Australia, sexual assault on a deceased person is not classified as a crime. He claimed his intent was to rape Sophia, but he never meant to kill anyone. Sophia's relatives were shocked by the police's negligence and blamed them for allowing the dangerous criminal to remain free. They pointed out that in 2003, investigators ignored crucial evidence that showed Dante was dangerous. If that evidence had been addressed and he had been held accountable, Sophia would not have encountered him in the restroom that day, and she would still be alive. It was revealed that Dante wasn't even listed among the most dangerous criminals prone. However, this was not Dante's second crime. In 2001, while on vacation with his family, Dante was arrested for sexually assaulting a young girl in another country. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was released, and no information about the incident was shared with the local police. Before Sophia's murder, Dante stalked at least 10 other girls. Later, the public began discussing new disturbing information about the murder of another child. This was the infamous case of 2-year-old James Bulger, brutally murdered on February 12, 1993. His mother had briefly left him unattended behind the door of a butcher's shop in a shopping center in Liverpool, UK. She didn't intend to stay long as she was just picking up an order, but there was a mix-up, delaying her return. When she came out, her son was missing. She immediately began searching and called the police. James's body was discovered 2 days later. A train had passed over him, but he had died beforehand. A forensic expert identified 42 injuries on James's body, including 10 skull fractures. Because of the numerous injuries, it was impossible to determine which one caused his death. It was later discovered that James had been noticed by 2 9-year-old boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, who had skipped school that day. They aimlessly wandered around the shopping center, committing several petty thefts. Upon seeing James, they decided to have some fun with him. They forcibly took him away and brutally assaulted him, hitting him with a 10-kilogram iron bar. They kicked, trampled, and threw bricks and stones at him and poured paint on his face. When they saw James was no longer moving, they dragged him to the railroad tracks and left him to die, hoping to disguise the murder as an accident. The crime was quickly solved thanks to CCTV footage from the shopping center, which showed James being taken away, leading to the arrest of John and Robert. They had previously attempted to kidnap another child in a shopping mall, but the mother quickly intervened and saved the child. It was found that after James left the shopping center, they were seen by 38 people along the way. Passers-by observed they forcefully dragging the child. They claimed that James was their younger brother, and they told others they were taking him to the police station because he was lost. No one intervened in the situation. Investigators suspect the crime was not sexual in nature since the child was not wearing underwear, but the examination could not confirm this for certain. Robert Thompson and John Venables denied any sexual abuse of James but were unable to clearly explain why they undressed the child. John and Robert were sentenced to imprisonment for an indefinite period, meaning they would remain in prison until authorities determined they were no longer a threat to society, with a minimum sentence of 10 years. However, due to public pressure, their minimum sentence was increased to 15 years in July 1994. In 1997, the House of Lords overturned this decision, reducing the minimum sentence back to 10 years. Consequently, they served only 8 years in prison and were released in June 2001. By their release, they had completed secondary and advanced level education. While in prison, they suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, with John frequently experiencing nightmares about James. Importantly, they were given new identities and guaranteed complete anonymity. Any publications revealing their new identities or showing their photographs were officially prohibited. The authorities believed they deserved the second chance at a normal life, and this measure was also taken for their safety, as it was feared that the public might harm them. The public was outraged by the lenient punishment and the protection of their identity. People wanted to know their names and whereabouts to avoid any potential danger. There was skepticism about their ability to reform, which proved justified. On March 2, 2010, John was sent back to prison for storing and distributing explicit photos of children. He received a 2-year sentence and was released in February 2018. Then, he to be charged again. John faced charges for possessing explicit child photos, leading to a 40-month prison sentence. There were reports that he might receive a new identity and undergo plastic surgery at the state's expense to keep his identity hidden, a move James's parents strongly opposed. In July 2019, UK authorities discussed the possibility of relocating him to Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, as maintaining his anonymity in the UK had become too costly. There is almost no information about Robert Thompson. The only known fact is that he was forbidden from communicating with John and was relocated. It is unknown whether he reformed or returned to crime like John. After the murder of Sophia Urrutia, many suspected that Dante, who killed Sophia in a restroom, was actually Robert Thompson with a new identity. He received help with relocation and confidentiality, and many details of their biographies matched. Dante lived in Great Britain for 8 years, coinciding with the time of James's murder. In both cases, the victims were found in a shopping center. It is believed there was a sexual motive, and the victims were of a similar age and appearance. However, this theory could not be confirmed. The police denied any connection. The public suspects the denial was due to confidentiality. Many continue to believe they are the same person and consider him very dangerous. The year after Sophia's murder in March, Dante did not plead guilty to any charges. Consequently, the police reduced the charge from premeditated murder to simple murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Additionally, the sexual assault charge was dropped due to the inability to prove it occurred before Sophia's death. This situation highlights the sometimes absurd nature of the Western Australian legal system. Detectives allegedly obtained a confession from Dante, but none of the interrogations were properly recorded, so they could not be used as evidence. At the trial, due to public pressure, Dante was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 13 years. However, he was able to reduce his time on parole. According to the laws at the time of his conviction, Dante was eligible for early release by 2019, with his case reviewed every 3 years. Each time, there is a chance for him to receive a pardon. The next review of Dante's case occurred in 2022, but it was decided to keep him in prison until at least 2025. The family of Sophia and the public hope that Dante, monster, remains incarcerated for life, seeing him as a danger to others. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Amy Carnevale. Amy Carnevale was born on April 13th of this year in Beverly, Massachusetts, USA. Her father was a science teacher at a local school, and her mother worked as an investment consultant. Amy had a brother, Christopher, who was born 4 years earlier. Their family was very close-knit, supporting each other during difficult times. However, a few years after Amy's birth, tensions began to rise in the family. Eventually, her parents decided to divorce. At the time, Amy was just 6 years old, and the news was a huge shock for her. She struggled with her feelings for a while but eventually came to accept the situation. When she started school, it marked a new hopeful chapter in her life. Throughout this period, her family maintained their connection with her, which helped ease the emotional effects of her parents' separation. Amy was a beautiful and intelligent girl who became popular at school. She joined the cheerleading team and played field hockey. Friendly and sociable. Despite her busy social life, she had a deep love for nature and enjoyed spending time outdoors. Amy often combined her passion for nature with sports by playing golf with her father. Although she lived with her mother, she had a strong and positive relationship with her father. Amy dreams of becoming a hairstylist or hairdresser because she enjoys making her friends look beautiful. At this point in her life, she is preparing to enter high school, and she is a member of the school's cheerleading squad. She recently met a boy named Jamie Fuller at a friend's party. Amy was 12 years old, and Jamie was 14 at the time. It was well known that Jamie was a difficult person and often disrupted the peace at school. While he wasn't aggressive or malicious, some of his jokes crossed the line. Amy's parents disapproved of the relationship, thinking he was not good enough for her. When they first met, he was a skinny guy. But later he decided to get fit and build muscle to impress others. In pursuit of this, he chose to use steroids to accelerate his progress. Their relationship faced frequent challenges. There were times when they wouldn't speak for weeks but would eventually get back together. However, after he began using steroids, Amy and her friends noticed significant changes in his behavior. Jamie became increasingly aggressive and unpredictable. Their arguments grew more common, occurring both at school and outside of it. Jamie's treatment of Amy deteriorated, and some of his friends reported that he made hurtful comments that she did not deserve. Things got worse. At Amy's age, she didn't know what to focus on in a relationship or how to fight back against her boyfriend's controlling behavior. Jamie acted like he was in charge, trying to control every aspect of her life. Jamie began dictating who she could talk to and wanted to know where she was at all times. He even tried to create conflict between her and her closest friends and family. Jamie became increasingly controlling, telling her what to wear, how to look, and who she could be friends with. He tried to cut her off from school sports teams. Even though Amy complied with his demands, he continued to find new ways to insult and provoke her. Amy's friends often witnessed the humiliation she faced at Jamie's hands. Since 2020, several states have enacted laws classifying manipulative and controlling behavior as a crime. Research shows that this behavior often marks the beginning of a dangerous path that can lead to physical violence or even death for the victim. Unfortunately, at that time, had nothing to charge against him. Despite the fact that her friends were very worried about what was happening, Jamie's behavior became increasingly unpredictable and problems with the law began. In the 90s, he was arrested twice for armed assault on a person. However, due to his age and lack of previous offenses, Jamie got away with it. He also convinced his girlfriend to keep quiet about these incidents. During this time, Amy did not share much about her relationship difficulties with others. She and Jamie frequently broke up and got back together, indicating that their relationship was in trouble. Jamie eventually left and Amy informed her friends of the breakup, but they reconciled soon after. Amy rarely shared her problems, partly because she was raised by her mother, who worked long hours and could not fully deal with her daughter's personal problems. Therefore, Amy kept her feelings to herself. At the same time, they were dealing with housing issues after a long period of renting. During this time, Amy stayed with various friends and lived with Diane Viggers, one of Jamie's ex-girlfriends. Despite this relationship, they became good friends. The situation was expected to improve on September 5, 1991, when Amy, her mother, and brother prepared to move into their new home. They had been renting for a long time, which had put a strain on their family finances, making this move a much-anticipated change in their lives. Amy had been living with her friend Diane before this incident. After breaking up with her manipulative boyfriend again, she was determined not to get back together with him. That day, she attended another field hockey practice and excitedly told her friends about her decision to end a toxic relationship for good. However, she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend, Jamie, kept calling her. Although she tried to ignore him, he was persistent. He wanted to see her, but she refused. He eventually asked her if she would like to cut his hair as a farewell gesture to their past relationship. After some consideration, she agreed and made plans to visit Jamie that evening, planning to return home a few hours later. Amy did not come home on time, and Diane was very worried about her. Amy was only 14 years old, so the delay made her friend increasingly worried. Diane called Amy's mother, and she could not find her daughter either. Their concerns increased when they discovered that Amy had left her purse and personal belongings behind, indicating that she did not intend to be gone for long. After waiting until morning, they decided to contact the police. After arriving at the police station, Amy's mother made plans to meet Jamie, whom Amy was supposed to meet. Jamie was cooperative from the start. He spoke to both the mother and the police and answered their questions openly. He even joined in the search efforts in the area. Despite being the prime suspect in Amy's disappearance, no evidence of her has ever been found. Searches of Jamie's home and car have turned up nothing. On August 28, 1991, an anonymous informant contacted the police station, claiming to know the location of Amy's body. This revelation caught the police's attention, and they were keen to find out the identity of this informant and the source of his information. The informant was identified as 19-year-old Michael Melita, a friend of Jamie's. When the police arrived at his home, he promptly agreed to assist with the investigation. At the police department, he confessed everything he knew about the tragic events of August 23. He explained that on August 22, the day before, Amy had planned to go to the beach with her friends. Jamie discovered her plans and grew angry. Fearing that there would be other guys at the beach party, his jealousy intensified. He felt restless and wanted to control Amy. On that same day, he met with Michael and voiced his wish to kill his ex-girlfriend. Multiple individuals were aware of Jamie's harmful intentions, yet none reported these plans to the police. They failed to warn Amy or her parents about the potential threat. On the evening of August 23, Amy visited her ex-boyfriend's house, thinking she was just there to get a haircut. However, she found 3 other boys there, 15-year-old Dominic Scola, 19-year-old Michael Melita, and 17-year-old Scott Ward. Just before Amy arrived, Jamie took out a large knife and showed it to the others, saying it was for his ex-girlfriend. He then placed the knife on a dresser. Jamie then suggested that the group take a walk in the nearby woods. During the walk, he and Amy went ahead while the other 3 lost sight of them. Michael confessed that he didn't completely believe Jamie's intentions to harm Amy, but no one felt brave enough to stop him because they were scared. Ultimately, Michael was the only one who ran to the location where Jamie and Amy had gone. He discovered Jamie covered in blood. Amy suffered multiple stab wounds on her chest, back, and stomach. Despite her injuries, she attempted to get up and escape, but her attacker was relentless. Michael mentioned that he didn't hear her screams until it was too late to help her. After Amy, who had her throat cut, collapsed, she continued to fight for her life. In that moment, she managed to say, "Jamie, I love you," which only enraged her attacker further. Jamie then began to stomp on her head. Afterward, Jamie, covered in blood, returned to his friends and described the events in detail while waving a bloody knife. Michael noted that everyone was afraid of becoming the next target, so they supported Jamie's actions. They all went home together, where they spent several hours drinking and talking calmly. Jamie took a shower to wash off the blood and changed his clothes. Jamie and Michael walked into the woods to where Amy's body was left. It was dark by then. They wrapped her body in trash bags and joked about the situation, showing no remorse or regret. When they reached the pond, they tied several concrete blocks together and threw the body into the water from the dock. Jamie made a sarcastic comment as he drowned Amy's body. He then took a bloody bracelet and necklace from her, wiped the blood off them, and wore them around his neck. This behavior is typical of a serial killer who keeps trophies as a reminder of his crimes. After Michael explained everything to the police, he was asked again how he could be involved in Amy's death. He clarified that he did not stab her, he only helped his friend dispose of her body because he was threatened. Michael confessed that he was afraid of Jamie. He believed that if Jamie learned about his conversation with the police, he would be killed. According to Michael, at first, the group thought the idea of murder was a terrible joke, and they only grasped the seriousness of the situation when it was too late. As the situation progressed, the three friends went along with Jamie's plans to avoid provoking him. On August 28, the informant was taken to the pond he had described. Michael pointed out the spot where the body was disposed of. Around 7:30 a.m., divers discovered Amy's body, which was in a shocking condition. It was evident that she had been murdered violently. The forensic expert identified that she was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she went missing. Analysis confirmed that she died on Friday, the evening she disappeared. Additionally, experts validated all of Michael's statements about the injuries on her body. They found about 10 stab wounds and a severe cut to her throat. The police could not find Jamie. Jamie's mother said she did not know where he was. So the police decided to interview the young people that Michael had mentioned. It turned out that they had known about the murder plan for over a year. During this time, the couple frequently broke up and got back together after Amy decided to leave Jamie. He did not want to let her go because he could not allow her to be with someone else. Therefore, in the end, he decided to kill her. As the police questioned the young men, more disturbing details about the case emerged. Just before they broke up, Amy had told her boyfriend that she was pregnant. He was upset by the news, especially since Amy had intended to keep the baby. Jamie was furious and even gave money to friends to attack Amy, hoping she would lose the baby. He wanted to avoid the responsibility of being a father, but his friends refused to help him. One of Jamie's friends recalled Jamie shouting that Amy had never agreed to terminate the pregnancy. Jamie eventually decided to take action against her. However, after an autopsy, police discovered that Amy was not pregnant at the time of her death. The rumor of her pregnancy became one of many speculations in the case. However, this does not rule out the possibility that she may have been pregnant with Jamie's child and had terminated the pregnancy. Unfortunately, her physical condition makes it impossible to verify these claims. The police began talking to Diane, who had lived with Amy before she was murdered. It turned out that Diane was Jamie's ex-girlfriend and had gone through the same problems in her relationship with Jamie as Amy had. Diane completely empathized with Amy's experience in a toxic relationship. Diane had also faced abuse and pressure from Jamie, but she had successfully escaped the situation unscathed. Unbeknownst to her, Diane had known about Jamie's plan to kill Amy shortly before Amy moved in with her. Jamie had mentioned taking Amy for a walk in the woods where he would give her flowers, then stab her and dump her body in a pond. However, Diane found this story so unbelievable that she chose not to warn anyone about the potential danger. When the Jamie Fuller was arrested, he faced charges of first-degree murder. Jamie smiled throughout the court proceedings and even made jokes about the victim, showing no signs of regret or remorse. During his interrogation, he remained calm and attempted to shift the blame to his friends for Amy's murder. However, when other people close to the victim were questioned, it came to light that Michael had boasted about helping Jamie dispose of the body after the murder. He was subsequently arrested for being an accomplice. It was obvious that the remaining two friends could have been witnesses to the massacre but never reported it to the police. They also knew about their friend's intentions, which he had openly discussed. Nearly a year after Amy's funeral, a witness named Scott Ward gave an interview to a local newspaper. He expressed disbelief over the events and felt guilty for not sounding the alarm sooner, which might have prevented the tragedy. At that time, he was already under investigation. Other teenagers suggested that Michael was not as innocent as he appeared. They claimed he encouraged the murder of the girl and hinted that his involvement in the crime could be more significant than he admitted. Ultimately, the police determined that only Michael and Jamie were responsible for the murder, while the others were not connected to the crime and were not arrested. Public outrage grew as people needed to know the truth and find ways to protect their communities from criminals who would harm schoolgirls for no reason. Locals had good reason to believe that all four teenagers were involved in the tragedy. The boys' parents, however, maintained their son's innocence and denied any involvement in the crime. However, police had evidence that Jamie had openly discussed his plans throughout the day. His friends even pressured him to act on them. This behavior showed Jamie was struggling and felt compelled to prove his strength. What motivated Amy's murder? Was it jealousy, a psychotic episode, a desire to harm his child, or provocation? Although the young man was only 16 at the time of the crime, he was tried as an adult. Jamie maintained his innocence and was released on bail of $2,500, which his mother paid. His lawyers pointed out that he had consumed alcohol, and they argued that the combination with steroids could lead to uncontrollable aggression. Therefore, the defense aimed to classify the crime as non-premeditated murder due to insanity, claiming that excessive steroid use can result in psychosis and other mental health issues. The lawyers requested a psychiatric evaluation for Jamie, which involved several assessments by independent experts. All concluded that Jamie was mentally stable and fit to stand trial. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office argued that the attack was motivated by jealousy. They highlighted the manipulative behavior, strict control, and ongoing assaults that the Amy had endured in the months leading up to the incident. According to Michael's confession, Jamie sought revenge because Amy attended a beach party with her friends. Another friend in the group said Jamie believed that Amy's pregnancy had to be terminated at all costs. The prosecution presented several witnesses, including Jamie's friend Ronald, who had taken carpentry classes with him. In the spring of 1991, Ronald testified in court about Amy's pregnancy. During this testimony, Jamie allegedly mentioned that the only way to get rid of the baby was to kill Amy. Dominic, who was with them that night, testified that he saw Jamie and his girlfriend go into the woods. He then heard some screaming. Dominic then noticed that Jamie had blood on her clothes and hands. Jamie even showed them the bloody knife he used in the attack. The blade was disfigured, indicating extreme violence. Dominic confirmed what Michael had said. Jamie recounted the details of the massacre he had committed. He explained that he first gagged Amy, professed his love for her, and then stabbed her in the stomach. Even then, she was still alive when he slit her throat. Amy told him that she still loved him, which made Jamie so angry that he stomped on her neck and started jumping on her head. The young witnesses claimed that Jamie was sober throughout the attack. They had only consumed alcohol after the murder. Jamie's mother had previously told police that alcohol had a negative effect on him, leading to anger and aggression. She recounted an incident where he nearly destroyed her room in a drunken fight with her. However, alcohol was not a factor in this situation. The forensic expert who testified for the prosecution explained that the stab wound was so deep that it almost went all the way through Amy's body, indicating a high level of hatred behind the murder. There were no signs of sexual violence, suggesting the attack may have been motivated by revenge or jealousy. One of the stab wounds penetrated the bone, disfiguring the knife point, and Amy had extensive bruising on her face and head injuries. Jamie, speaking to the media, claimed that he could not kill Amy because he still loved her. This claim was a lie. His televised declaration of love shocked and devastated Amy's mother, who was struggling to cope with her loss, resorting to sedatives and seeking help from a psychologist. To her, Jamie's display of love was a cruel taunt. The hearing lasted 7 days, after which the jury began deliberating its verdict. The prosecution argued that Jamie was an extremely dangerous individual with the potential to become a serial killer and called for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The defense, in contrast, argued that the young man had lost control due to steroid abuse. The jury deliberated for 2 days, taking about 6 hours to reach a decision. Jamie was found guilty on October 23, 1992, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a separate decision involving Jamie's friend, Michael, who had helped destroy evidence, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison after a hearing on his involvement. The victim's mother, Amy, felt this was an unfairly light sentence for his role in the crime. In 2013, new state laws were enacted that allowed minors convicted of serious offenses to apply for parole. Under these laws, each case had to be assessed individually. As a result of this legal change, Jamie, who had spent most of his adult life in prison, was given the chance for release in 2019 when he was 40 years old. Jamie's request for parole was reviewed but has been postponed indefinitely. The family of the brutal massacre victim has repeatedly appealed to law enforcement, demanding that this brutal man not be released under any circumstances. As of now, he is still incarcerated. Amy's mother struggled to cope with her daughter's death, requiring regular visits to a psychiatrist and a significant amount of medication. In 2009, her health declined rapidly, leading to her passing at the age of 57. Her family believes that her early death was directly linked to the loss of her beloved daughter. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Diogo Goncalves. Albufeira, a beautiful resort town, is one of the most visited places in the Algarve region of southern Portugal. It was there, in 1999, that Diogo was born. He is the only child of a poor but hard-working family whose income mainly depended on the of tourism. Diogo's parents saw him as a good son, and those who knew him described him as decent, responsible, hardworking, and reliable. He was also a very outgoing young man who loved being surrounded by friends and family. Diogo went to high school in his hometown. After graduating, he started studying computer science. To fund his education and support his family, he got a job at McDonald's in 2015 when he was just 16. At 17, while still working there, his life became miserable when his father suffered a stroke and fell into a vegetative state, as reported by the media. That same year, while Diogo and his mother were dealing with his father's health crisis, another tragedy struck. His mother, who had always supported his learning and growth, was hit by a car on her way to work at the mall, where she cleaned. The car dragged her several meters, leading to her falling into a ditch where she died from her injuries. Although the driver fled, but the police identified him and he faced trial. While he was waiting for the conviction of the person responsible for his parents' suffering, Diogo needed to be transferred to a medical unit where he received the necessary care. His maternal aunt, worried about his situation, had suggested that he move in with her. However, they had a serious disagreement, and after a few weeks, it became impossible for them to continue living together. Diogo explained what was happening to his friend, who offered him a room in his house in the Aldea neighborhood, also in Albufeira. At the time, the closeness to the friend's relatives helped Diogo feel at home. Despite his young age, Diogo demonstrated great ability to handle and overcome difficult situations with patience and optimism. In 2017, at just 18 years old, Diogo graduated with a degree in computer technology and completed a 6-month internship at Vila Vida Park, a leading 5-star hotel. His impressive work led the executives to offer him a position as a technician. In 2018, Diogo accepted the offer and left his job at a fast food restaurant chain, where he had worked for nearly a year and had become a duty manager. This thing a new chapter in his life, filled with opportunities to advance after overcoming difficult times. After working at the company for some time and anticipating better days ahead, he decided to buy a car. Diogo got along well with his coworkers, especially Maria Malvero, a 19-year-old security guard at the hotel. Maria, like Diogo, comes from a family with difficult circumstances and faces her own challenges. Her mother had mental health issues, and her father left when she was very young. She never spoke to him again. Maria, interested in martial arts, practiced karate and aspired to be a police officer. However, her application to the police academy was rejected due to her tattoo. Disappointed, she decided to study at Securinfo, a company that trains security guards in various private security fields. Diogo was interested in Maria and made his feelings known from the start, but she did not feel the same way and treated him coldly. Fabio Acosta, a close friend of Diogo, said that Diogo was deeply in love with Maria. He was so infatuated that he declined a well-paying job offer from the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon because he didn't want to be away from her. Additionally, he would bring her meals when she was working. Over time, they became very close, and people around them assumed they were a couple. However, there was no romantic relationship between them. Maria told Diogo she didn't want anything to do with him because she had just ended a toxic relationship with a naval officer, yet she was still giving him false hopes. Diogo never gave up hope for a future with Maria and sought opportunities to be near her and make her happy in various ways. One day, he was deeply disappointed when he saw a video on social media of Maria kissing another girl. Diogo was upset because he believed she should have told him that she wasn't interested in men and that this was why they could never be together. Fabio, Diogo's best friend, tried to reassure him by saying that girls often do this, but Diogo was not convinced. He insisted that she had lied to him and that was why she had rejected him. Despite the disappointment, Diogo and Maria stayed friends, and she continued to accept his gifts and invitations for dates. Several times, Diogo offered to walk her home, but she always said her roommate had a jealous boyfriend and she didn't want to bring another man into the apartment. As time went on, in December 2019, Diogo learned that he would finally receive compensation for his mother's death, which had occurred 3 years earlier. After receiving the payment amount of up to 70,000 euros, Diogo decided it was time to buy a house to avoid continuing to pay rent. He shared the good news with his friend Maria, who left her job at the hotel a few weeks later. Maria stated that she could no longer stand the colleagues' comments about the relationship between her and Diogo. She also explained that she wanted to spend more time with her mother, who needed a lot of attention due to a mental illness. At that moment, there was no reason to doubt her words. However, subsequent incidents suggest that her decision to leave the hotel was motivated by dark reasons, and this is where the third character in the story, Mariana Fonseca, 20 years old, comes in. Mariana worked as a nurse at the hospital and had a dear relationship with Maria. They both lived together in Mariana's parents' house, because they still do not have enough money to have their own home where they could enjoy their relationship. When Maria discovered the substantial amount of money Diogo, she started getting closer to he. It seems Maria shared this information with Mariana, and they decide to trick Diogo in order to gain access to his bank account and steal the compensation money. After Maria repeatedly refused to date Diogo, one day, she told him she wanted to spend a romantic evening with him. This was a significant surprise for Diogo, who was overjoyed and couldn't believe his luck. After waiting for so long, he was ecstatic about finally being with the girl he loved. They planned the meeting for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo was thrilled and didn't question why Maria had suddenly changed her mind. Maria and Mariana had different accounts of the incident that day, but here are the facts according to media reports based on official information. When Diogo entered, Maria offered him some orange juice she had brought. However, the drink contained an unexpected ingredient, diindawomethane, DIM, a drug affecting the central nervous system, with analgesic and sedative properties. Maria using the drug, which she had stolen from the hospital. Her plan was to sedate Diogo, access his banking information, and manipulate his fingers to unlock his phone. Mariana waited in a car outside while Maria executed the plan. Mariana even texted she several times to check if the drug had taken effect, as it was taking longer than expected. The situation inside the house became increasingly more tense. Diogo didn't understand what was happening and started to feel anxious. Maria then tries to calm him down by promising to show him an erotic dance, but first she has to tie him to a table. After being restrained for a few minutes, Diogo panicked and asked Maria to release him, but she became aggressive, leading to a struggle. Using her martial arts skills, she subdued Diogo by knocking him to the floor and choking him, prevent him from breathing. According to Mariana's testimony, Maria later instructed her to enter the apartment. Upon entering, Mariana found Diogo on the floor. She questioned Maria about the incident and criticized her for going beyond their plans, which was to steal his keys and take his money. Seeing Diogo unresponsive, Mariana began resuscitation efforts. When he woke up, he was extremely agitated and attempted to attack she. It seems he realized that Mariana was plotting against him, led him to try to defend himself. In response to Diogo's aggression towards Mariana, Maria intervened by grabbing him from behind, bringing him to the ground, and restraining him by squeezing his neck again. Diogo's life ended tragically at the hands of the girl he loved, Maria. His body was found in the living room of Maria and Mariana's house, where they continued with their planned robbery. They first severed his thumb and index finger to unlock his phone, access a mobile payment app, and transfer money. This process took several days because there was a limit on the amount that could be transferred each day. When he learned that Diogo had work scheduled the next day, Mariana and Maria tried to prevent his colleagues from noticing his absence, searching for him, and reporting him missing. One of Diogo's colleagues received a text from his number stating that he couldn't make it to work that day and needed someone to cover for him. Diogo's colleague, who disliked last-minute shift changes, found the request odd. Diogo asked if everything was okay and received a simple yes in response. The conversation among Diogo's coworker and others continued throughout Friday and part of Saturday, but the unusual messages increasingly seemed uncharacteristic of him. One person receiving these messages was Diogo's supervisor. One message said that Diogo wouldn't be returning to work because he had met a woman in France and planned to move in with her. This explanation seemed odd to the supervisor because Diogo was a responsible employee and wouldn't leave his job so abruptly. To find the answer, the supervisor attempted to call Diogo but received no answer. Later, he got a message stating that Diogo was not in to talk on the phone. The supervisor responded, saying he could only feel reassured if they spoke. He wanted to hear Diogo's voice and wanted to know what was happening. Diogo's loved ones reacted to messages sent by Maria and Mariana, in which they pretended to be Diogo. This prompted they to alter their plan for explaining Diogo's sudden disappearance. They decided to make it appear as if Diogo had ended his life and planned to dismember his body to get rid of the evidence. Maria later mentioned that their actions were inspired by the TV show Dexter, featuring a forensic scientist who killed criminals and disguised his crimes by dismembering their bodies. After executing their horrific plan, Mariana and Maria placed Diogo's body in trash bags in the trunk of their car. They then went to an ATM and shopped at a mall, where they were seen hugging and laughing on security cameras. Following this, they returned to Mariana's home to begin dismembering Diogo's body. Ultimately, they put Diogo's torso in a black bag and discarded the other parts in a container. Meanwhile, Diogo's friends launched a campaign to report him as missing and reached out to the authorities. The authorities then waited the required 48 hours before officially declaring him missing. Mariana and Maria left the house, with Maria getting into Diogo's car to drive to a cliff near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. Mariana followed behind in her own car. Around 2 p.m. that day, Mariana threw Diogo's torso off the cliff and abandoned his car nearby. They planned to make it seem like he had jumped voluntarily. However, instead of falling into the sea, the remains got stuck on a rock. Finally, Mariana and Maria drove together in Mariana's car for about 12 minutes, covering 7 kilometers, to the Inferno Dago waterfall in Tavira, where they disposed of the rest of Diogo's body in the water. Shortly after, Diogo's car was discovered in a parking lot near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. A newspaper report stated that 2 laptops were found inside the car, led forensic police to investigate. A land and sea search was launched, leading to the discovery of a young man's torso partially covered by a black garbage bag. Meanwhile, at another location along the coast, a French couple found the young man's head at Inferno Toigo. Diogo's hands and feet were later recovered during an intensive police search. The investigators assigned to the case found the details surrounding Diogo's death unusual. They noted that he was a quiet man who don't hang out with bad people. As the police continued their investigation, they discovered that Diogo had received a significant payout following his mother's death. While examining money orders, they found that a large sum had been transferred from Diogo's account to someone named Maria. Naturally, the detectives' next move was to locate Maria to understand why she had received money from Diogo. Maria attempted to persuade the police that she killed Diogo in self-defense, claiming he was trying to abuse her. She stated that this was why she had left the hotel prior to the incident. However, a review of the text messages between Diogo and Maria, they showed that her claims were false. After Maria stopped working, she and Diogo grew close. During her initial meeting with the police, Maria insisted that she was entirely responsible for planning and carrying out the incident that led to the shooting. Maria clarified that Mariana was not involved in the crime at all. However, Mariana's account of the incident contradicted what Maria's claimed. Mariana reported that Maria to wanting to steal Diogo's money and intended to kill him. She stated that Maria's plan was to make him suffer in order to extract his bank account password. Investigators gathered enough evidence to convict both girls, Mariana and Maria, including phone records, the Diogo's cell phone, and ATM surveillance footage. Maria and Mariana were arrested on April 1, 2020, and faced court in June of that year. The judge carefully reviewed the incidents that Maria described. Maria remained steadfast in her confession and denied any involvement Mariana's. She stated that Diogo's body was in a suitcase in a car parked in the garage for 2 days, and it was there that the dismemberment took place, while Mariana's family was sleeping. After hearing Maria's detailed testimony about the incidents, the judge repeatedly asked her Mariana was during the dismemberment, as which had been done with surgical precision at the joints. All attention in the courtroom turned to the nurse, Mariana. She anticipated the questions and clarified that, since everyone was aware of her employment at the hospital, they mistakenly thought she was responsible for dismembering the corpse. She said that dismemberment could easily be done by using information on the internet. The judge imposed a detention order on both Mariana and Maria, citing that they had committed a serious crime in a creepy, calculated, reckless, and extremely brutal manner. A few months later, on February 24, 2021, the trial began. During her testimony on February 26, 2021, Maria claimed that she initially wanted revenge on Diogo because he had abused her, but did not intend to kill him. She admitted that her goal was to humiliate him and clarified that Mariana had no relationship with Diogo. Mariana and Maria attended court together but did not make eye contact during the trial. It is rumored that after the arrest and subsequent jail time, they decided to end their friendship. The trial included testimonies from several witnesses, including forensic expert Teresa Costa. She explained that the level of diphenhydramine found in Diogo's blood was much lower than expected from the 3 ampoules, suggesting that he either did not take the prescribed dose or had taken it many hours before his death. On April 27, 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Maria Malvero was convicted of several serious crimes, including aggravated murder, destroy the body, robbery, unauthorized access, fraud, carjacking, and possession of an illegal weapon. As a result, she received a 25-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €265,000 in compensation to Diogo's father. Mariana Fonseca, on the other hand, was acquitted of murder but found guilty of destroy the body, complicity, and fraud. She received a 4-year prison sentence but was released because none of her convictions required pre-trial detention, at least until the final sentencing. The court determined that Mariana's effort to save life Diogo indicated that she did not intend to kill him. The judge based his decision on a confession from she, in which she accepted full responsibility for her actions. However, this verdict was not accepted by the Portuguese public, who viewed Mariana as equally guilty of the serious crime against Diogo alongside Maria. After the verdict, Mariana exited the courtroom through a separate exit where her father, who had attended all the hearings, was waiting. Neither of them spoke to the media. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970. He, along with his older brother, grew up in Indiana, United States. Born into a middle-class family, John was an ambitious young man with a strong desire for independence and self-improvement. Right after graduating from high school, he began looking for ways to make money. His brother recalls that John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant, but he left the position quickly for unknown reasons, and he feeling frustrated at work. However, this setback did not dampen his ambitions. Soon after, he found a new job that offered him greater independence and helped him realize his true passion, sales. John's career took off when he became a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. At first, his family doubted his decision, but he quickly proved them wrong. By the end of his first year, John had become the top salesperson in the area. He worked diligently, often putting in 12 to 16 hours a day, which earned him recognition at company meetings and the respect of his peers. John's success inspired other salespeople, who came to him for guidance, new ideas, and motivation, and he happily took on a leadership role. During this period, John met Judy, a 20 years old from Texas. She comes from a low-income family. Born in October 1969, Judy was confident and outgoing. Although John wasn't looking to hire new salespeople at the time, Judy's enthusiasm and assertiveness convinced him to give her a chance. Despite being young, but Judy had already experienced significant life events. At 14, with her parents' permission, she had gotten married and later divorced, resulting in 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks. John decided to mentor Judy in vacuum cleaner sales. Judy to be a quick learner, and she not only earning a spot on John's sales team but also winning his affection. The two eventually started dating each other. John's life was thriving. He was renowned for his exceptional sales skills and training abilities, and Judy's support in both his personal and professional life. This foundation gave John the confidence to launch his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. As part of his venture, John offered training sessions to salespeople, sharing effective strategies he developed and the passion that drove his success. His company rose to become one of the area's top performers, and John consistently credited his success to Judy's unwavering support. In 1992, John and Judy got married, having established stability in their professional lives. In the following years, they dedicate themselves to demonstrating what a good salesperson can achieve in life. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica, in addition to Judy's 2 children from a previous relationship, Christina and Daniel. After that, their family moved residences several times, always to nicer houses, giving their children access to better schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had no issues with his stepchildren. While Daniel was energetic and sometimes mischievous, Christina was a sweet and well-behaved child. John and Judy enjoyed a comfortable life, and John used his wealth as motivation for young salespeople he trained, proving that hard work and determination can bring about a prosperous life. As Christina and Daniel entered teenage years, problems arose. Christina began associating with people who exhibited poor behavior and allegedly engaged in underage drinking and even drug use. At the same time, Daniel, who was 13, was dealing with anger issues and hanging out with a questionable group of friends. One incident occurred when Daniel took his father John's car and drove recklessly through the neighborhood with his friends, knocking down and damaging several mailbox posts. To avoid trouble with the police, John took responsibility for the damage and personally paid the affected homeowners the next day. Around this time, John received a complaint from his stepson's school regarding the boy's misconduct. Unfortunately, the situation escalated, and John physically struck the young man, causing further strain on their relationship. 9 years after the family began living together, Judy decided to take them on a trip to Texas, where she grew up. During this visit, Judy expressed her concerns to her brother about her troubled marriage and the mistreatment of Christina and Daniel by John. However, Judy blamed John for her children's problems, and she made excuses for their misbehavior, which made their family problems worse. John's life became even more complicated when he began to suspect his wife of having an affair, specifically with one of his employees. To uncover the truth, John took matters into his own hands. He installed cameras in several parts of the office and eventually obtained clear evidence of his wife's infidelity. This discovery was a real shock to John, completely changing his previously happy and friendly personality. John's behavior deteriorated as he began drinking excessively, leading to intense arguments with Judy and violent outbursts towards his children. When Tiffany's teacher informed John that she hadn't brought her homework, he punished her with a belt, leaving visible marks. The teacher reported the incident to social services the next day, after seeing the injuries. Before social services arrived, John intimidated the children by implying that if they wanted to maintain their comfortable life, they should remain silent about the beating. As a result, Tiffany falsely accused Daniel of being responsible, and he didn't deny it. John's bad mood affected not only his family, but also his employees and the company's clients, who suffered through his fits of anger as a result of his wife's infidelity. In an attempt to create distance between his wife and the person she was involved with, John moved his family to a more affluent area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite still loving his wife and hoping that a change of environment would give them a fresh start, the situation did not improve. While Judy lost weight and changed her style to improve her appearance, John did the opposite. He let himself go, grew a beard, started smoking, and only wore jeans. His preoccupation with his personal problems left him constantly distracted. As a result, the business began to suffer, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. John was forced to sell his boat to stay financially afloat. Rumors spread throughout the office that Judy was having an affair with Jeff, John's closest business associate. Although the validity of these rumors was uncertain, but they put more strain on John and Judy's already troubled marriage. John's world was turned upside down when Judy told him she wanted a divorce. However, John made it clear that if she left him, she would be left with nothing. He felt he had given her everything, including lifting her out of poverty, accepting her children, providing her with luxuries, and loving her. However, he became exasperated when she decides to leave, threatening that if she leaves him, she will leave with empty hands. John possessed a crucial piece of evidence, a recording of Judy having an affair with Jeff. As a result, their relationship became more strained in early 2003, which also affected their children's behavior. On Thursday, April 17, 2013, John and Judy attempted to resolve their issues over dinner at a restaurant. After finishing dinner, they called home to check on the children and said they would be back soon. However, their plans changed when Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. Leaving the restaurant, they went to the company and John brought the rest of the dinner to Jeff, who was working late. When they arrived at the office in an isolated industrial area around 10 p.m., John went inside to talk to Jeff while Judy quickly retrieved the notebook and returned to their car. Minutes after, John left the office. He opened the rear door on the driver's side of his vehicle to retrieve something. Suddenly, 2 loud gunshots rang out, and John fell to the ground in the parking lot. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911 to report the incident. Police and medical units arrived at the scene quickly. Sadly, 33-year-old John Parker was found to have been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. During the investigation, Judy, who was inside the vehicle when the shots were fired, was questioned by the authorities. She told them she was sitting in the car when her husband, John, came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side. Her account was limited, as she did not see what happened next, only hearing the 2 loud gunshots after John opened the door. Judy remembered that when she heard the shots, she immediately hid behind the seat. When she cautiously lifted her head, she caught a brief glimpse of a man wearing dark clothing fleeing the scene. They also noticed that John's wallet was missing, leading them to initially believe it was a robbery. As investigators took a closer look, they started to question the details surrounding John's death. Since no one knew about Judy and John's plans, several inconsistencies stood out. What could be the motive for targeting an empty industrial area at night when there would be no one around? If the goal was robbery, it doesn't make sense that the perpetrator would kill John before taking his belongings, especially when he was wearing a $20,000 gold Rolex and other easily accessible valuables. Moreover, why didn't the thief search John's pockets? This is a common action in robberies. The investigation into John's death raised more questions than it answered. 2 bullet casings found at the scene matched Judy's claim of hearing 2 shots. It was clear that one of the shots had killed John instantly, but there was no official information about the second shot. The investigators started by taking a statement from Judy, the key witness to the incident. Judy reported that her husband had previously gotten into an argument with one of his employees. She was able to identify the employee involved in the argument, but beyond this, she had no additional information to provide beyond what she had already shared at the scene. The investigators also spoke with Jeff, who was inside the office at the time of the shooting. However, he was unable to provide any useful information, as he did not exit the office until after the shots had been fired and the incident was over. The authorities informed Christina that her stepfather had passed away. After nearly ruling out a robbery motive, detectives shifted their investigation to focus on the people close to John, starting with an employee who had previously expressed resentment towards him. The employee confirmed that they had a significant disagreement, but claimed that it had been peacefully resolved. He also provided an alibi, which was thoroughly investigated and verified. The investigation was expanded to cover almost all individuals associated with John, including those he did business with. past and present employees, competitors in his industry, and his personal friends and social connections. The investigation into John's murder revealed a new lead involving Judy. Unlike what is typically expected of a grieving person, her behavior during her husband's funeral was unusual, as she seemed cheerful and was chatting with friends. Another notable observation was that her ex-husband seemed completely unbothered by the incident, calmly reading a newspaper just 4 days after John's murder. Daniel, 15, was brought in for questioning on suspicion of being involved in the murder. The police suspected him because of an incident 6 months earlier. At that time, gang members told the police that Daniel had paid them to kill his stepfather, John. However, the gang members claimed they never planned to carry out the murder and just kept the money. The police didn't find their story believable and took the money, but they didn't seem to do anything more about it at the time. Later, after John was killed, the police decided to re-examine whether Daniel might be involved in the crime. During questioning, Daniel admitted to paying people to hurt John, but not intending to kill him, but rather injure him, specifically by breaking his legs. Authorities did detain one of the individuals Daniel to have hired, but this person was released after a thorough investigation verified their alibi. Daniel was eventually released after 9 days, due to insufficient evidence and because he was a minor. As the case unfolded, it became clear that John had prior conflicts with the children of Judy, Christina, and Daniel. This led to further scrutiny of Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. Christina denied any involvement when questioned by investigators. Both Christina and Daniel expressed a desire to eliminate John, leading investigators to wonder where the money for these schemes came from, and they suspected that Judy might be the one giving them the money to carry out these plans. When investigators looked more closely, they discovered that before John's death, he and Judy's relationship had deteriorated partly due to Judy's infidelity. Despite this, it appeared John had no intention of leaving Judy and was instead working on saving their troubled marriage. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband appeared to be financial gain. Detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. Following John's death, Judy tried to collect the insurance money, but the insurance company initially denied her claim due to the ongoing investigation into his death. The payment was also postponed because John's father suspected Judy was involved in his son's death and was investigating further. The case eventually stalled due to lack of concrete evidence, but a lot has changed in John's family. Judy was rarely at home, she devoting her time to her new partner, Jeff, who was also John's manager. As a result, Christina and Daniel took on more responsibilities, caring for their younger sisters, Tiffany and Erica. After several months, Judy and Jeff decided to relocate out of state with John's younger daughters, Tiffany and Erica. Around this time, Daniel went to live with his biological father, while Christina remained in the house, now pregnant and in a relationship with her boyfriend. The investigation was stalled, but the authorities didn't give up. They kept the case open and repeatedly reviewed the files, hoping to find a clue new. This persistence eventually paid off. The detectives received a new lead, which led them to question some of the classmates of Christina and Daniel. The classmates confessed to selling a gun to Christina and Daniel, which sparked an investigation into a family John-owned piece of land that Christina used for target practice. When investigators searched the area, they found multiple spent bullet casings. Laboratory analysis of these casings revealed a crucial piece of evidence. The casings matched those found at John's 2007 crime scene. New information came to light when a narcotics officer revealed that Christina's ex-boyfriend had been involved in a drug-related case. With the hope of receiving a lighter sentence, Christina's ex-boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In the conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot. When confronted with this new evidence, Christina began to cooperate. As the owner of the gun used in the crime, the 21-year-old Christina admitted to buying the weapon. She also admitted that on the night of the incident, she had asked her parents to visit the office, claiming she had left her homework behind there. Christina admitted to being involved in plot to kill John and stated that her younger brother Daniel was designated as the person who would open fire. When Daniel was found and arrested in Arizona, he was confronted with the new evidence and Christina's confession. Daniel confessed to shooting John, but claimed that their mother, Judy, was the one who had come up with the plan. According to Daniel, Judy had stolen $7,500 by forging company checks and had used this money to try to hire someone to kill John, but ultimately decided to have Daniel do it instead. Judy's original plan failed when the individuals she hired took the payment but did not complete the task. At that point, Judy instructed them to buy a gun for her son to use instead. Furthermore, Daniel revealed that it was Judy who created the excuse for her and John to leave the house that night. When Christina called to pick up her homework that she had left at company, he shot John in the head. The second shot occurred accidentally as Daniel rummaged through John's pockets, searching for his wallet as his mother had instructed. Following the shooting, Daniel returned home without alerting his younger sisters. His sister Christina helped by distracting Tiffany and Erica with television, allowing Daniel to enter the house unnoticed. Christina and Daniel claimed that their mother manipulated them into committing the crime by telling them they had been abused by John and promising that by doing so, they would gain a better life with more freedom and financial stability. However, this was not Judy's first attempt to harm her husband, as she had previously tried to poison his food, which led to he being briefly hospitalized. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. However, Christina entered a not guilty plea for the conspiracy charge and was released on bail a few months later. In 2008, when Daniel was 20 years old, he pleaded guilty to conspiring to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to cooperate and testify against his mother in exchange for a lighter sentence. Instead of being charged with murder, he would face a sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison for conspiracy. According to Daniel, the plan to kill John began nearly a year before the incident, when he was just 14 years old. Judy and Christina initially brought the idea to him. He claimed, and Judy supplied him with a gun and other necessary items for the crime. These items included money to buy black clothing, gloves, and a mask. His mother also instructed him on how to commit the crime without leaving any evidence behind, including taking a thorough shower to eliminate gunpowder residue after returning home. Then Judy took charge of getting rid of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. 6 years later, in July 2009, Judy knew she couldn't escape the law anymore and turned herself in. She agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, admitting she had planned, carried out, and tried to cover up the crime. The prosecutors wanted Judy to spend the rest of her life in prison, with a minimum sentence of 28 years and a maximum sentence of 35 years. Judy, who was nearly 40 years old at the time, was given a 33-year prison sentence in August 2009. The next month, her co-conspirator Daniel received a 23-year sentence. Christina was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Press reports said Daniel was released in 2017 after participating in a community transition court program and that he subsequently chose to live a low-profile life. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but sadly died from a drug overdose shortly after. This case is a tragic example of how greed can lead people to commit terrible crimes. Judy's actions had devastating consequences for her family. Despite overcoming early struggles and achieving success, her desire for more led her to destroy the life of a successful businessman, John Parker. Her actions also deeply affected her 4 children, leaving 2 in prison and taking away their father. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rowan Ford. Rowan Ford was born on April 11, 1998, in San Diego, California. When she was young, her parents divorced, and her mother, Colleen, moved with her to a small town called Stella, Missouri. Colleen later met a man named David, and they married. Colleen already had several children from a previous marriage, and soon after their marriage, she and David had a daughter together. Rowan has 2 older sisters and 2 older brothers, and they are very close. She enjoys spending time outdoors, biking around town, swimming, and pursuing her passion for painting. She also enjoys attending Sunday school at her local church, where she often volunteers to help children who are having trouble with their homework. In November 2007, when Rowan was 9 years old, she was in 4th grade at her local elementary school. Her mother worked the night shift at a store, while her stepfather was often at the farm during the day. As a result, Rowan was often left to fend for herself, which helped her become very independent. On November 2nd, she was home alone, as usual. Colleen went to work, and her stepfather had not yet returned from the farm. The next morning, around 9 o'clock, Colleen returned home from her night shift and checked Rowan's room, but her daughter was not there. She asked her husband if he knew where Rowan was, and he told her that Rowan had asked him if she could stay the night at a friend's house. He agreed without asking the friend's name, since their town was small and he wasn't worried about her safety. Colleen felt worried and decided to ask all of Rowan's friends. Since their town only had a few streets, this didn't take long. However, none of Rowan's friends had seen her, and she had not spent the night at any of their homes. This made her mother even more anxious. Colleen searched all over town but could not find her daughter. She finally returned home and told her husband that Rowan was missing. She asked him to contact the police to report the incident, but he assured her that everything was fine and that Rowan would be home soon. After waiting for a few more hours without seeing Rowan, Colleen decided to call 911 and take matters into her own hands. The local sheriff immediately organized a search operation. He went to Colleen's house to interview David, the last person to see Rowan before she disappeared. David said that he had been working on the farm with his coworker Christopher that evening when Nathan, a mutual friend of theirs, came to visit. They decided to go to David's house to drink and play pool. They stopped by the store to buy some alcohol before heading to David's house, where they stayed for a few hours. That night, Christopher asked Nathan to drive him to a nearby town to pick up car. They convinced David to join them to continue their party. Before leaving the house, Christopher checked to see if Rowan was asleep in her room and found her already asleep. After David left with his friends, they stopped at a store to buy more alcohol and then went to Christopher's trailer, where they continued drinking for about an hour. David then decided to go home and asked Nathan for a ride. Nathan agreed but chose to take a detour rather than the highway, as he was quite drunk and did not want to get in trouble with the police. Nathan dropped David off and drove home, while David went straight to bed. Shortly after, Rowan woke him up and asked if she could stay the night at a friend's house. Without thinking much of it, he agreed and fell asleep. The police approached the case with suspicion. What puzzled them most was that a 9-year-old girl would decide to go to a friend's house in the middle of the night, especially since her stepfather had not asked about the friend she was visiting. The police chief suspected that David might be hiding something or had something to do with Rowan's disappearance, but there was no evidence to support this suspicion. The police searched the town and the surrounding area until late at night. Locals quickly joined the search because they knew the Rowan family and wanted to help. Stella had a population of only about 150, so news of Rowan's disappearance spread rapidly throughout the area. Locals usually felt safe letting their children play outside, as there was not much going on in such a peaceful place. However, When Rowan disappeared without a trace and the police could not find her throughout the day, the people of Stella became extremely panicked. On the first day of the search, nothing was found. Then, on November 4th, the police went to the neighboring town and spoke to Christopher, who confirmed David's story. However, Christopher added that his friend had not contacted him since that evening, and he had only learned of Rowan's disappearance that same day. The police expanded the search and brought in more volunteers, but they still could not find Rowan or any clues regarding her whereabouts. The next morning, the FBI joined the investigation while local police continued to search for Rowan in the area around town. Detectives focused on the possibility of kidnapping. They strongly doubted the David story, as it seemed very suspicious. The police also checked with all of Rowan's friends and confirmed that she had not visited any of them that night. Investigators interviewed David several times, and his testimony varied in detail, further raising suspicions about his involvement. For example, he provided different times for being away that night and even stated that Rowan may not have asked him before going to visit a friend. FBI agents further discovered that on the night of her missing, David had asked his mother to lend him her car, although he had not initially disclosed this to the police. As a result, the police seized both cars for testing, but experts found no evidence. Detectives continued discussions with Christopher and Nathan, as both were with David that night. Christopher was invited to the police station and told the same story as the day before. He also agreed to take a polygraph test, which showed no signs of deception. A few hours after Christopher left the station and returned to work, he saw Chief Clark's car. Christopher signaled for Chief Clark to stop. Sheriff Clark is the police chief in the town of Whitton and has known Christopher for 17 years, since Christopher was a child. Clark was a friend of Christopher's adoptive parents, and Christopher had always respected him. He often turned to him for advice or help in times of trouble. Sheriff Clark contacted Christopher, and they discussed Rowan's disappearance. Clark was aware of the case but was not directly involved, as the search was being handled by the Stella Police Department. During their conversation, Clark suspected that Christopher was withholding information, as Rowan's life was in danger and her fate was still uncertain. Therefore, Clark decided to share these suspicions with the FBI, contacting agents to explain his concerns. Investigators suspect that Christopher may be withholding important information about Rowan's disappearance, which could implicate her stepfather. It is possible that he asked Christopher to lie and alter some details in his account of the events of that night. Christopher now fears that he will be considered an accomplice if he tells the truth. Sheriff Clark informed the FBI agents that he had a good and trusting relationship with Christopher, so he wanted to help convince him to share information. That same day, Christopher went to Colleen's home to ask her about the progress of the search. Simultaneously, the FBI agents also visited Rowan's mother again. When they met with Christopher, they continued to ask him a few questions, and he once again confirmed that the events of that night happened exactly as he had described them. However, this time he also mentioned that he did not rule out the possibility that David was involved in Rowan's disappearance and expressed his desire to help them find the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. He suggested wearing a wiretap and approaching David to try to get him to confess. However, the detectives decided not to use such tactics. Instead, they asked Christopher if he could think of any locations where his friend might have hidden Rowan's body, and he suggested several places. The next day, the police began investigating these locations while continuing to search the area around Stella's house. FBI agents once again brought David in for questioning, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. Detectives also searched David's house in the hope of finding clues, but nothing was discovered. On November 7th, the police asked Christopher to return to the station to obtain his consent to search the safe in David's home. Christopher had been living with David for several months due to not having his own place, and some of his belongings were still there. Christopher gave the police permission to search the safe, his trailer, and his car. He also voluntarily provided a DNA sample and agreed to answer additional questions from the detectives. They began questioning him that evening and again asked him to confirm David's story. This time, however, Christopher suddenly admitted that his friend's story was not entirely true. The investigators began to pressure him to tell them what really happened. This pressure caused Christopher to become agitated. He said that if the police were going to treat him like a criminal and try to implicate him in Rowan's disappearance, he would not continue the conversation. The detectives then had to end the interview, and Christopher left the station. That night, he went to see Chief Clark and told him the whole story. He complained that the detectives were treating him as a suspect and said that he might need to hire a lawyer. The chief replied that it was his right, but asked him to understand that the police were only doing what they could to find Rowan. In response, Christopher stated that he would not speak to them anymore and that if he wanted to share any more information, he would only speak to Sheriff Clark. He continued to persuade Christopher to share what he knew. After a while, Christopher began to cry and said that he had always loved Rowan and would never hurt her. During his time living in David's house, Christopher developed a close relationship with Rowan and the other children. They began to consider him a member of the family and even called him Uncle Christopher. Sheriff Clark realized that Christopher was about to reveal everything he knew. However, just as Christopher was about to share, someone came to the police station, causing Sheriff Clark to temporarily lose focus. Christopher then left the office without revealing what he was about to say. Sheriff Clark eventually contacted the FBI and informed them about the conversation. He explained that Christopher was willing to share most of what he knew, but warned that if he was pressed too hard, Christopher might refuse to talk and seek legal counsel. Clark offered to give Christopher time to think it over, and the detectives agreed. The search for Rowan continued the next day without success. However, the situation changed on November 9th, a week after Rowan went missing. Search parties found Rowan's body in a remote area near a town called Powell, about 10 miles from where Stella lived. The body was covered in leaves and debris, with only a sock remaining. Medical examiners determined that Rowan had been strangled and sexually assaulted. Shortly after the body was discovered, FBI agents contacted Chief Clark and asked him to speak with Christopher again, hoping he would reveal more information. The chief learned that Christopher had come to the police station earlier that morning when Chief Clark was not there and had informed other officers that he urgently needed to see him. The chief searched everywhere for Christopher but could not find him. Christopher then contacted Chief Clark himself. He expressed obvious distress and concern that he was being followed. He explained that after hearing about the discovery of Rowan's body, he had driven around town to calm down and had noticed a gray car following him. Chief Clark claimed to be unaware of any surveillance activity and asked to meet Christopher directly. When Christopher met with the investigators, he expressed concern for his safety. He feared that after the discovery of Rowan's body, he might be charged with murder and that someone would take revenge on him. Clark took him to the police station and explained that now that the case had been ruled a murder, it was time for him to reveal everything he knew. Christopher began to cry. The sheriff asked him to tell him what David had done to Rowan. Christopher said that there were too many people at the police station and that he did not want to discuss it there. He suggested going to a quieter place and mentioned a small bridge a few miles from their town. The sheriff agreed, and they drove there together. As they got out of the car, Christopher suddenly raised his hands and asked the police to handcuff him. The sheriff was surprised and said that it was unnecessary, but Christopher insisted that after what he had said, the police had to do so. Christopher then began to recount the story he had told the police many times. He went to his trailer with Nathan and David, where they continued drinking. After a while, his friends decided to go home, and David asked Nathan to drive them. They said they would take a detour to avoid the police. However, Christopher then suddenly announced that he wanted to sexually assault Rowan and that he planned to do so. Knowing that it would take his friends a long time to take a detour through the fields, he drove straight to David's house on the main highway. He then barged into Rowan's room, picked her up, and carried her to his car, intending not to wake her. Christopher then took Rowan to his trailer, where he assaulted her. According to Christopher, Rowan had just woken up and tried to resist but was unable to escape. Christopher did not turn on the lights or talk to Rowan because he did not want her to recognize him. After committing this act, Christopher intended to take Rowan home and leave. But the plan did not go as intended. When Christopher carried Rowan out of the trailer, the moon was shining brightly, and Rowan saw Christopher's face clearly. Panicking, Christopher grabbed a rope and strangled her. When she died, he loaded her body into the car and began to think about what to do next. Initially, he wanted to throw her off the bridge, the same bridge where he stood with Sheriff Clark, but he realized her body would be found too quickly. So, he got into the driver's seat and started driving around the county, considering other options. Soon, he remembered a large pit near a neighboring town and headed there. He threw the victim's body into the pit and tried to cover it with branches, but the pit was too large to cover completely. When he returned to the car, he noticed traces of Rowan's blood on his clothes and the mattress. Christopher realized he needed to get rid of the pants, underwear, and rope used to kill the victim. He gathered all of these items and planned to put them in a large barrel to burn. However, Christopher quickly realized that such a fire would certainly attract attention, so he dragged the barrel into the shed, closed the door, and set it on fire. Sheriff Clark was surprised by this story. He had previously believed that David had committed the crime and that Christopher was just hiding some information. It was hard to believe that a man he had known for nearly 20 years could be so brutal. Christopher had 3 young children, and although he had not lived with them since his divorce, he had always seemed like a nice man. But the truth was much colder. After Christopher finished telling his story, he voluntarily went to the police station. The sheriff did not handcuff him. It was only after they arrived and the man repeated his confession to the FBI agents that he was arrested for murder. Christopher also signed a voluntary consent form to allow his trailer and car to be searched. He eventually said that he regretted his actions and cried like a baby all the next day. Investigators went to inform David that Christopher had confessed to the murder. Based on David's behavior and inconsistent statements, they suspected that he might have been protecting his friend. However, they discovered something even more shocking. When brought in for questioning, David changed his testimony of events. According to David's testimony, when he came home and found Rowan not in her room, he suspected that Christopher might have kidnapped her. So he took his mother's car and drove to Christopher's trailer. When David entered the trailer, he found her lying on the bed with Christopher. Instead of saving Rowan, David decided to join in and bully her as well. David then helped his friend dispose of the body. He stated that throughout the incident, he was shocked and could not remember anything that happened. The detectives, who were initially surprised by this incident, contacted Christopher again to confirm David's statement. However, Christopher insisted that his friend was not involved and that everything happened exactly as he had previously said. This further confused the detectives, but Christopher's statement was consistent with the facts. A medical expert confirmed that Rowan had been strangled with a thin wire, a detail that only the killer would know. During the search of the trailer, the police found a container of ashes. In addition, they found a hair in the trailer that matched Rowan's. Although investigators were unable to determine who was telling the truth, both men made accusations against one another. As a result, David was also arrested, and both cases went to trial. During the trial, Christopher requested that all of his statements be removed from the record, arguing that he did not know they could be used against him and that the police had violated his rights. However, the judge rejected this request because all of his conversations with investigators had been completely voluntary. Christopher also tried to explain the difficult circumstances of his childhood. He had experienced many family changes since he was young, which had a significant impact on his development. Christopher also saw a specialist who confirmed that he exhibited signs of developmental problems but could not help him avoid punishment. In 2012, 5 years after the murder, he was sentenced to death. He attempted to appeal the conviction but was unsuccessful. For David, the situation was much more complicated. He admitted to attacking and killing Rowan, but his testimony contradicted Christopher's. If the prosecution decided to charge David with murder, Christopher's conviction would likely be overturned, and David could also evade responsibility because there was no solid evidence against him, such as DNA. The prosecution could not afford to make such a risky claim. In fact, they were still uncertain about David's involvement in the case. They did not rule out the possibility that David had committed the crime alongside Christopher, but there was no evidence to support this theory. In the end, a difficult decision was made. To avoid the risk of overturning Christopher's conviction, they reduced David's charges to significantly lesser ones. David pleaded guilty to 2 counts, child endangerment and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison, with a minimum of 5 years to serve.